incest, sexual abuse of animals, the fetishization of the female experience. All of this and more was addressed in Ethel Cain's, whose actual name is Hayden Anadonia's, recent statement to her audience, who accused her of almost a fantastical range of disturbing behavior and sexual fetishes. Hello, internet users. My name is Ava. I'm a writer, semi-reformed Tumblr blogger, and the founder and editor-in-chief of Ebony Tomatoes Collective, which is a Black and queer literary magazine. On this channel, I'll be talking about the cultural and political phenomena that ruffle my feathers. And today, I will be talking about the recent controversy surrounding Ethel Cain. For reference, Ethel Cain actually refers to the main character in Preacher's Daughter, which is Hayden's debut album. For the purposes of this video, I'll be using the name Hayden to refer to Hayden the person, and Ethel Cain to refer to her general persona. Just a bit of background, I've loved Ethel Cain for years at this point. I think she's one of the most talented lyricists and musicians out there right now. Preacher's Daughter got me through a shitty breakup, and it was all I listened to for way longer than I'd like to admit. I was in her top 0.05% of Spotify listeners one year. I follow her on Tumblr. I've listened to all of her music on Spotify, and when I exhausted Spotify, I went on SoundCloud and scrounged around in her unreleased demos. I'm on her godforsaken subreddit. I mean, you get the idea. So I'm not making this video to cancel Hayden or even to snatch the middle part off her head. However, in the wake of her past offenses, I'm grappling with how Ethel Cain has dealt with race up until this point and what that reveals about American culture and memory. Because there are things to be said, people. There are things to be said. This whole controversy started when someone on Reddit posted about how they used to go out with Hayden's new man, Austin, who's a trucker that she met off of I-10, which real, fuck the apps, but also crazy work. Tragic receipts of Hayden's old Curious Cat account surfaced and started circulating soon after that. In the receipts, she admits to having said the N-word followed by LOL, all lowercase. She jokingly calls out to build that wall. You get the idea. It was painful to read. Following the controversy, Hayden came out with a 2,136-word Google Doc statement addressing the beef. Most of the accusations against Hayden, which he spends most of the letter addressing, are clearly the work of transphobes who are out to perpetuate the myth of trans people as sexually deviant monsters who are out to ruin the fabric of femininity and also assault animals. To these accusations, I say, leave trans women alone and follow J.K. Rowling into the underworld where y'all belong. In the midst of all this, Hayden only spends 376 words addressing the racist receipts. She says, "That was my account and they were my words. I was 19 and I was entirely aware of what I was saying, and that was why I said it. I spent my later high school years being extremely progressive and SJW, as they called it at the time, as a way to reject the indoctrination of my environment and rebel against the prejudice, hatred, and ignorance of the culture I grew up in. After moving out of my parents' house, I fell into a subculture online that prioritized garnering attention at all costs. I flip-flopped again, rejecting all notions of my former cringe SJW behavior and intended to be as inflammatory and controversial as possible. I would have said, and usually did say, anything about anyone to gain attention and ultimately just make my friends laugh." Oof. Well, taking accountability is definitely a start, but I'd like to explore Ethel Cain's history with race and the Americana aesthetic as a whole just a bit further. Up until very recently, Ethel Cain's whole aesthetic has been defined by a Southern Gothic version of the Americana aesthetic, which was deeply inspired by her upbringing in the Bible Belt. Hayden is from Perry, Florida. She grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. Her daddy's a deacon. And while she was ostracized by her community when she initially came out, she is now close with her family and actually lives in Florida. One thing I admire about Hayden is that she's very proud of her Southern roots. She has repeatedly refuted the stereotype that the South is full of gun-toting racists and Trump supporters, and embraces the cultural richness and beauty of her region. In a time where city dwellers generalize and stereotype the South to no end, ignoring the trans, queer, and people of color who live there, I think Hayden's perspective on the South is actually a breath of fresh air. It's a testament to the fact that queerness can thrive outside of America's big cities and have a place in America's swamps and sticks. The truth is that queer and trans people are everywhere. We're making art everywhere. We're making a way out of no way, literally everywhere. That's kind of our whole thing. And I'm glad that an artist with such a large platform is giving a voice to queerness in the South. However, I wish that Hayden could expand her artistic vision a little bit to include Black people and other people of color, because we're there. We just haven't been mentioned yet. It's no secret that white people stole a great deal of Southern and Americana culture from Black people, only to repackage it with 50% less flavor for visibility and profit. And while Hayden has done a great job of representing the queer and trans Southern experience, her content is ubiquitously, como se dice, milky. She has reposted photos of the Confederate flag and white people with guns and baseball caps on her Tumblr, which she recently deactivated. Her music videos only feature her and or other white extras. Most of the artists she recommends, the artists and producers she plugs in her captions, and her friends in her tag photos are also white. Hayden addressed her use of the Americana aesthetic in an Instagram Live in 2022.
And I don't want the fact that I am talking about how great it is to live in the South as a trans woman to be overlooked because I am also white. And I don't want to leave that factor out of the equation, because I feel like this is a very important thing to talk about when you are doing the Americana aesthetic and you are using American flags and guns and such a polarizing backdrop for your artwork.
I think it was helpful for her to acknowledge that the highway pissing, gun toting, American flag waving aesthetic of her debut album, Preacher's Daughter, had the potential to overlook certain experiences, more specifically the Black and POC experience. She openly acknowledges her privilege as a white trans woman and says that she doesn't want to keep using images that perpetuate violence or polarize people, especially given that systemic racism impacts every area of life. Therefore, she will be moving away from the Americana aesthetic and towards less quote-unquote heavy-handed imagery. Honestly, it was great to see Hayden engage critically with her own work. It's refreshing to see an artist admit that they do come from a place of privilege and open that dialogue up with their audience. It was a good start to the sort of conversations that we need to be having about the Americana aesthetic as a whole, and I do hope that she continues to engage with her fan base in that way. However, I found it interesting that Hayden positioned the Americana aesthetic in opposition to the Black and POC experience. She implies that Americana, while not necessarily inherently offensive, dismisses the experience of marginalized people. And she's not completely wrong, of course, but it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, Americana has certainly been co-opted by cop lovers and skinheads and neo-Nazis, but they don't own the aesthetic, y'all. As a kid, my mom and I moved around the US a lot. Like most kids in this hellscape, I'll admit that I do feel an aching nostalgia upon seeing images of football fields, tall grass, strip malls, and highways. It's the aesthetic that put me onto Ethel Cain in the first damn place. My burning feelings of rage for the US government and the US war machine aside, I love the Americana aesthetic because it represents my experience in a lot of ways. What I don't relate to, however, is the unrelenting whiteness that Americana, indie, and alternative artists are shoving down their audience throat. It's a bad look and it's dishonest. America wouldn't exist without Black people, so there's no true Americana without Black people. What is Americana exactly? It's an aesthetic, culture, or musical genre that contains American elements or references. Americana music is influenced by country, rock, folk, and blues sounds. Everything from Lainey Wilson to Appalachian folk music to Born to Die to Cowboy Carter can arguably be considered to be Americana. The genre's most classic artists like Hank Williams or Johnny Cash use banjo and acoustic guitar to tell stories about life in the American countryside. These artists have been praised for their contribution to music and hailed as Americana legends, but can they take all the credit for the genre? Who do y'all think gave them the banjos? I recently spoke with Gold Lionheart, a Black and queer cultural worker who told me a little bit about the history of the banjo. While the world's earliest banjo traces back to ancient Mesopotamia, it has been a thing in West Africa for centuries. In Senegambian regions, an early version of the banjo, called the akonting, was played by griots, who were the honored storytellers and historians of many West African societies. When enslaved people were captured from West Africa, they brought their banjos with them and introduced them to the New World. Banjos were associated with only Black people up until the 1800s, and that is when colonizers started to get ideas. In the mid-19th century, minstrel shows where white performers played the banjo in blackface garnered international interest for the banjo and quote-unquote Negro music. Friendlier forms of cultural exchange were going on in Appalachia during this time, where Black railroad and steamboat workers were teaching their fellow white laborers how to play the banjo. Class solidarity. After emancipation, Black people created a whole new genre with the instrument, called the blues. Black farmers and sharecroppers who were newly freed from slavery but very far away from political and economic liberation used the blues to tell stories of the experiences of living under Jim Crow, Reconstruction, and the Great Migration. Juke joints, folk heroes, and cotton gins were immortalized through the blues, preserving one of the most unique and artistically potent moments in Black history. The blues and other genres created by Black artists like gospel and ragtime are the bluesprint, so to speak, for modern folk, country, and Americana musicians like Ethel Cain. If you are interested in learning more about the banjo's connection to Black culture, I'd recommend checking out the Black Banjo Reclamation Project, which was founded by Hannah Mayrie. Even though Hayden hasn't typically included Black people in her art or visuals or musical influences, Black culture is still a notable influence in her work. Nettles, Hayden's new single off of her upcoming album, heavily features the banjo. In an interview with Our Culture magazine, Hayden cites Christian music and Johnny Cash as some of her earliest musical influences, and Johnny Cash was taught by Gus Cannon, a Black musician who helped develop the country genre. And let's not forget, Hayden grew up Southern Baptist. Anyone who's even a little familiar with Ethel Cain knows that she does not play about her Jesus crosses and her gospel influences, which is yet another genre shaped by Black culture. Forced to convert to Christianity by missionaries and slave masters, enslaved people coped with the horror of their captivity through music and dance in segregated Black churches. African spirituality, where music and ritual is celebrated, added these elements of celebration and religious ecstasy to the Black Southern Baptist churches that we see today. Gospel music is still dominated by legendary Black artists like Kirk Franklin and Mahalia Jackson. Many classic gospel songs like Amazing Grace and Swing Low, Sweet Chariot have firm roots in this tradition. The parallels do not end with the music and the instrumentals, though. In Preacher's Daughter, Hayden tells the story of a character, Ethel Cain, who leaves home, flees to the American West, and falls in love with a man who kidnaps and cannibalizes her. Many of the album's songs, like Thoroughfare, House in Nebraska, and Western Nights, romanticize the American West as this beacon of freedom and wildness. This is a super common theme in the Americana genre, of course, because who doesn't want to ride off into the sunset and herd cattle in Wyoming? White people weren't the only ones going out west in the 19th century, though. According to the Smithsonian, 1 in 4 cowboys were Black. Many freed or escaped slaves preferred the lawless land of the West to manhunts and lynchings. So the issue isn't that Americana inherently dismisses Black people. The issue is that Ethel Cain has not given Black people sufficient credit or platform for their significant contributions to the aesthetic that she's currently profiting off of. Hayden has said that Preacher's Daughter was an extremely personal project for her and that it reflected her experiences growing up as a trans woman in the South. I see that, and I want to be considerate of that. One can assume that Hayden didn't interact with many people of color growing up in a place like Perry, Florida. She was homeschooled. She grew up in a conservative household. She was internet-minded from a young age. However, just because she may not remember Black people in her cultural or regional history does not mean that they weren't there. Incomplete histories, like the ones surrounding Americana music, create a sort of racial amnesia for white people. Their minds erase what their bodies and their art clearly remembers. While Ethel Cain seems to exist in an insulated universe of whiteness, her art and Hayden's hometown bear the undeniable scars of racial violence. Let's start with Hayden's hometown. As of 2023, only about 56% of Perry's population was white, and the second largest demographic was Black people, who made up about 40% of the population. Saucy Santana is actually also from Perry, but it doesn't seem like Black people have had the best go of it down there. Perry, Florida is home to the Perry Massacre of 1922, which followed the murder of a young white school teacher named Annie Ruby Hendry. In response, a mob of white people kidnapped and lynched 2 Black men. They also went on a massive manhunt across Florida and Georgia, killed 2 other men, and burned down numerous public buildings in the Black part of town. All of this happened within 10 days. This thesis discusses the issue of racial memory in Perry in 1922. In it, the historian Fitzhugh Brundage is quoted saying, "When Southern identity is assumed to be interchangeable with white identity, much more than semantics are at stake. White claims to power, status, and collective identity are advanced at the same time that Black claims are undercut." This shit has layers, though. Under all of its bravado, colonization is just the total fear of annihilation. Whiteness survives on the delusion of its own superiority, and without it, all the pomp and glamour of being white or privileged or whatever would just disappear. White Southern identity doesn't only undercut Black identity. It grows around an unspoken legacy of shame and violence. It refers to elements of Black trauma without calling it what it is. And if we don't name the thing, we have no way to move forward towards a path of liberation. I'm not sure if Hayden knows about the Perry Massacre, but she does allude to a form of lynching in her song Family Tree Intro off of Preacher's Daughter. Within Ethel Cain circles, Family Tree Intro is regarded as an exploration of intergenerational trauma and how Ethel Cain is doomed because of her family's abuse. However, it also feels eerily reminiscent of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, which is a protest song about the lynching of Black people in the South. In Strange Fruit, Billie Holiday sings, "Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees." In Family Tree Intro, Ethel Cain sings, "The fates already fuck me sideways, swinging by my neck from the family tree. He'll laugh and say, you know I raised you better than this, then leave me hanging so they can all laugh at me." So I will leave it to y'all to unpack that. Now, do I think it's inherently problematic for a white Southern artist to be singing about something like this? Not necessarily. White people should be grappling with racial violence just as much, if not more, than Black people. Even Strange Fruit was written by Abel Meeropol, a white Jewish communist. At the same time, can we really talk about white intergenerational trauma without mentioning the fact that y'all's granddaddies literally strung people up on trees and burned them alive? I don't think we can. I really don't think we can. And I hope that Hayden begins to face these types of issues head on instead of just using images of Black trauma to explore her own family dynamics. So, where do we go from here? Well, People have been super evil and transphobic to Hayden after all of this, hacking her Spotify, sending her death threats, and just generally harassing her and her family. As Hayden notes in her statement, there is no justice sought by this group. All they crave is the complete emotional destruction of me as a person. All of this doxing and cyberbullying is obviously extremely harmful to Hayden. Additionally, it promotes a circle-jerky carceral culture where we prioritize the rise and fall of white celebrities over investing our time, attention, and material resources to uplifting marginalized people. Even the large majority of Hayden's statement addresses the outlandish claims against her, leaving very little room to unpack the racial harm that she's done. People of color were still pushed to the background of white people's pain and drama. I know this story. I hate this story. We need to do better, people. Frankly, I don't want to see Hayden stop making music or get off the internet or whatever it is that these people are after. What I do want, however, is Black and queer and working class liberation. I'd like to see Hayden use her platform to give opportunities to Black artists, specifically artists that are also Black trans women. If musicians like Ethel Cain did even a morsel of the work Black people do to uplift our art and sustain our livelihoods, so many more of us would have our bills paid and our dreams achieved. Like, you're already famous, girl. You're already using Black culture for your benefit. Why not start using your fame for Black people's benefit? There are tons of contemporary Black artists making incredible Americana, folk, and alternative music right now. Like, Momo Boyd has a Canadian tux, a voice of an angel, and a damn dream, okay? Valerie June is a folksy singer whose voice literally gives me the chills. Raven Lene gives me spooky fae vibes. Even Ethel Cain fans on Tumblr are talking about BIPOC artists who are making similar music, like Adia Victoria, More Mother, and Spelling. Post one of them on your Instagram, Hayden. Get one of them to open your shows or star in one of your music videos or run your soundboard. I don't give a shit. Just let Black people win and get paid. Additionally, I want to see Hayden start engaging with her Southern identity in a truly intersectional way, beyond accountability and beyond apologies. While her earlier albums may have come solely from personal experience, Hayden has a much larger platform now, and we cannot afford racial amnesia in this economy. It shouldn't be the sole work of Black Southern anthropologists and cultural workers who are woefully underpaid, if they're even paid at all, to preserve and uplift Black history and culture. Hayden's level of visibility is an opportunity to do some real work in setting the record straight about white Southern identity. In Hayden's statement, she says, "As I move forward through my life, I aim to use my platform for good, for change, and for progress. I believe it's important not to atone through words alone, but through actions." Well, the words have been spoken. I'm curious to see what actions Hayden takes after this. In the meantime, I'll keep going to DJ sets and listening to playlists by Black, queer, and trans artists. I'll keep doing my part to keep Black history and creativity alive. If you got to this point, thank you so much for listening. If you like this content, please help a guy out and like this video and subscribe to my channel, where I'll be posting a lot more content like this. And in the description, I also linked all of my sources for all of the information that I shared today. Keep your feathers ruffled. I'll see y'all soon. I'm looking good. All right. Incest.